This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are interviewing the head of Machon Shilo, Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Shalom Harav Bar-Hayim. There are many people who feel that there is something wrong, something uninspiring in the Torah world. There seems to be a malaise among many Jews. Can the Rabbi please comment?
What strikes me about the Torah world at the present time, and this is not a new phenomenon, to be honest, is the lack of intellectual honesty and openness. This problem began, in my view, perhaps paradoxically in the eyes of many, with the advent of the Shulchan Aruch and the form of halachic discourse that developed since that time, about 500 odd years ago, a bit less, down to the present day. The form of halachic discourse, the parameters of halachic discourse in the Jewish world over the last few centuries have been characterized by, for the most part, have been characterized by a lack of willingness to be critical of opinions expressed by earlier authorities, to examine those opinions, to point out where these opinions perhaps seem to be mistaken, where the conclusion is not based on the facts before us, or, for example, simply accepting a certain position because it is widespread and common, but not necessarily true. I recall that once I heard on the radio an interview with Professor Moshe, who is the rector of Bar-Hayim University. He was very talented as a young man, both in mathematics and in Talmudic studies. And he related in this interview that he was unsure of which direction he should take in life, whether he should throw himself into mathematics or into Torah study. And he discussed this with his father, who was also a Torah scholar. And his father said to him as follows. He says, "I know you, Moshe. I know that you think for yourself, you think clearly, and you do not accept something as being true if it seems to you that it is untrue. If you go into mathematics and you disprove a great theorem in mathematics laid down by an earlier mathematical genius, you'll get the Nobel Prize or some other similar award. If you do the same thing in the realm of Torah and you, on a particular issue, demonstrate clearly that the Rambam was mistaken, you'll be put in cherem. So I suggest that you go into mathematics." And that's what he did. And that's a very telling and true story, as it happens. The problem with the Torah world, in my view, is first and foremost the inability to deal with the fact that all Talmidei Chachamim, all Torah scholars, are human beings who therefore can also be mistaken. And this is precisely why we have a multiplicity of views in Torah. We have many different commentators and halachic decisors, etc., from different periods of history. We have much material before us which can be analyzed, must be analyzed and understood in depth. But the most important thing is, having understood and analyzed those sources and come to clear conclusions with clear proof, we must be willing to stand on those conclusions. We must be willing to say this opinion is correct for the following reasons, A, B, and C. And this other opinion is less likely or altogether incorrect for these reasons, D, E, and F, as we do in any other realm of intellectual endeavor. In the Torah world today, by and large, it is not accepted, not acceptable and not encouraged, certainly not encouraged, to express one's own view on almost anything at all. There's a famous teshuvah of the Nodab Yehuda, Harav Yechezkel Landau, regarding shaving on Hol HaMoed. Without going into the details, he is asked by a certain rabbi why he, Rav Landau, was willing to rely on the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam, who was a Dat Yahid, an individual, a singular opinion against the opinion of many. And Rav Yechezkel Landau writes back simply and he says, why do you find it improper on my part to rely on an opinion, even if it is an individual opinion, if I consider it to be correct, if I think it is correct and it fits the Talmudic sources as we have it? There's no reason why I cannot rely on that opinion and endorse it and tell others to follow that opinion. And yet he was attacked for so doing, even though he was considered a very great authority in his generation. We're talking about the early to mid 18th century in Germany, in this case, where he lived. But the fact is that his position was already considered an unusual position. And this kind of creative, original and insightful halachic thinking has become less and less the norm in the Torah world. And I refer to Talmudic study and halachic studies because anyone who understands Judaism knows that the foundation upon which the Torah rests in the real sense, the way the Torah is manifested and practiced and lived in the real world, comes down to halachic practice. One can talk all day long about ideas and philosophies and principles and ideologies, and all these things are very important. But if there is a disconnect between the ideology and the practical halachic practice, the day-to-day halachic practice of Jews on the ground, if there is a contradiction between these two things, then the action speaks much louder than the word. This is, I think, why many young, talented, very intelligent men, and for that matter also women, today there are some women who wish to study Torah and halakha in a serious manner. This is why many young people, I think, shy away from continuing Torah studies in a serious manner for many years and choose to turn to other endeavors and other forms of academic achievement. Because in other areas of academic achievement, when a person proves something to be true, when the person has researched and understood and come up with a new insight, a new interpretation, which seems to be true, where this new interpretation, shall we say, solves some of the earlier problems that were till that time unsolved, that person will be acclaimed, that person will be recognized for achieving something great. This is how it is, for example, in the world of science, in the realm of science. One can prove, if one can prove that something is true, even though it was considered not to be so by many great authorities early in history, no one will come to that person and say, how could you disagree with so-and-so? For example, how could you disagree with Einstein? If you can prove that Einstein was wrong on something, well, as I said, you'll get the Nobel Prize. You won't be told off, you will not be castigated. Your work, if it stands up to critical review, will be appreciated and seen as a work of genius, as something true which projects the human race, the humankind forward. And now we understand that which we did not understand before. In the realm of Torah, this is all too much, very much lacking, all too rare and scarce. And generally, the yeshiva world, Rashi Yeshivot, the heads of yeshivas, etc., discourage original thinking, discourage many questions. They really want to produce yes men, who at most will know how to quote from earlier sources and essentially parrot those positions without really either knowing, or even if they do perhaps know how to understand and analyze all those positions and all those primary sources, they will never be willing to actually express their own opinion. And I think many thinking, intelligent people find this unacceptable and problematic. I certainly do.
Harav, what can be done to remedy this situation?
There is only one remedy for that which is not true, and that is to replace it with something that is true. If something is wrong, it has to be swept away. If that thing which is wrong is accepted as true, and therefore people are reluctant to have it swept away, then one has to explain why it is so. The study of Torah in earlier generations, many centuries ago, was not as it is widely understood and practiced today. If we go back to the time of the Gaonim or the Rishonim, in medieval times, we see that the Rishonim were willing to disagree with the earlier authorities based on their understanding and analysis of the sources. They're willing to come up with new ideas, new interpretations. Many Rishonim were willing to relate to new realities and posit new halachic positions based on those changing realities, something which today is, as I said, very rare, very unusual, and essentially non-existent. So the way to change this reality is to train young people who have the ability and the interest to study Torah in an open-minded and comprehensive manner, based on a thorough-going understanding of all the primary sources, which means starting from the Tanakh and going through the Torah She'Ba'al Peh, the Mishnah and the Tosefta and the Talmudim and all the other sources, and then moving on to the Rishonim and seeing how all these things developed and were understood, and understanding how one approaches such matters, how one understands them. There is a lot of wisdom and understanding and methodology involved in properly understanding and comprehending and analyzing these sources, something which cannot be transmitted by way of a book, for example. This is something one has to experience from a teacher. This is what a yeshiva is about, or what a yeshiva should be about. It should not be about producing production line robots who follow a certain line, who all repeat the same well-worn truths, even though they're not perhaps necessarily so true, but rather to produce individuals who understand, who can think for themselves, who can think critically. This is the gift of Hashem to human beings, the rational mind, the ability to think, to analyze, and to gain insight and understanding. And if we treat this lightly, or if we train people not to use this God-given gift, then we are insulting He who gave this gift to us. If the Torah world were to change its approach in this manner, I think many very talented young people who show great promise in their Torah studies would remain in the Torah world, would find more meaning and significance to the study of Torah. And this would also, I think, have an effect on the youth. I think there are many young people who are turned off by what they see in the Torah world for the reasons that we mentioned. Sometimes they themselves cannot actually verbalize what it is that is bothering them. But I believe this is one of the issues, at least, that bothers many of them. They find that many of the positions, the halachic positions, and also ideological positions expressed by different people in the Torah world, they find them to be unacceptable. They do not always seem to make sense. They just don't feel right, even though they can't always explain why. They perhaps haven't learnt enough to know, to be able to point to any source and say this is wrong, but they feel inside that something is not right. And they feel a sense of a general malaise which exists in the Torah world, in the yeshiva world. And interestingly, sometimes simple people who are as yet unlearned perhaps and not sufficiently knowledgeable, nevertheless they are onto something, they have a point. Generally speaking, as we know, one can fool a lot of the people a lot of the time, but one cannot fool all of the people all of the time.
Thank you, Harav Bar-Hayim, and a word to our viewers. If you would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with Harav Bar-Hayim in honor or memory of a loved one, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.